another Parts Factory installation tutorial video. Today, what we're going to be doing is changing an air conditioning compressor on a Holden Barina TK. But before we go any further, I do have a disclaimer. This is very important. It's the most important thing. If there's anything I have to tell you, it will require depressurization of the air conditioning system with the proper gear. Now, most of the time, the only place that's gonna have the proper gear is a mechanical workshop. So I know this is a DIY video, but there is 2 steps that it's not possible for an individual like yourself, if you're doing this from home, unless you have a evacuation system, it's not gonna be possible to empty the air conditioning gas out of this. So you go to your mechanic, you ask him to evacuate your system. It's all you need done. You don't let them do anything else. And yeah, as long as he fully evacuates your system, we can then go ahead, disconnect the aircon lines, pull off the compressor. We'll obviously be chucking a compressor back on, belt back over, get those lines back down with the correct O-rings and seals, etc, etc. Then you take a trip back to your mechanic, ask him to obviously fill your car back up with your AC refrigerant, and boom, that's it. Air conditioning works. Now I can imagine with this type of DIY sort of activity, you could save upwards of $1,000 because that's what they're charging to do the labor. I'm about to show you how to do it yourself. So look, that's where we're at. So as I said, get the air conditioning system evacuated out, and then yeah, we'll get on to step 2. So before we get started, we want to do a little check to make sure we've got all the required tools. Now the air conditioning compressor is going to come out through the bottom. So we're going to need a jack and a stand or a ramp. I'm basically just going to ramp the car up on the right hand wheel. That'll allow me to get in under there, undo the final 2 12mm bolts on the bottom, and pull the aircon pump out from the bottom. Other than that, you obviously need a pump, nice socket set. But what could come in handy is a large wrench like this. This is a 3/8 drive wrench. And that's to get into the belt tensioner, relieve the pressure on the belt tensioner so we can get the belt off so we can pull the pump out. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Let's get into it. So first things first, we want to use a 14mm just to undo the main high pressure lines on the top of the pump. We want to keep our little 14mm nut, stick it over to the side. We want to grab our high pressure lines like that and just bring it over out of the way a bit. If you can, see if you can kind of tuck it without breaking anything. Way out of the way, just so you can get in there without any, headaches. Now, you can obviously see there's a bit of air conditioning residue around here. It's nothing to really worry about, guys. It's all going to be getting replaced anyway. Right, so in order to get the fan belt off the air conditioning compressor, the next step is to get into the fan belt tensioner. And to do that, based on these little 4-cylinder cars, it's quite a tight squeeze. So I'm going to remove this air box and air line, see if I can get a better view of that fan belt tensioner. So we're going to start by removing it off the throttle body. Looks like a little 7mm, 6mm, 6mm socket. Don't be afraid to use a power gun at this point. Nice and loose like that. We'll do it on here as well. Now I've noticed that there's 8mm around the edge of the air box. But there's 10mm, 3 of them, 1, 2, 3, to remove the entire airbox. So that's what we're going to do. We'll start with the one that's down here. So we've got 1 10mm just there. Put all these bolts along this ridge just up here. And another one here. Another one here. At that point, this airbox would actually just lift out. To make that a little bit easier, I'm going to do is pull this little pipe off here. Might need a pair of pliers. pair of pointy nose pliers will do the trick. Just squish that alligator clamp. And you should just be able to get it to twist off that pipe there, you see that? You want to put it over there out of the way. And at this point, this will kind of pull off that throttle body pretty easy. Just like that. And then we can actually lift this entire airbox. We'll undo this single plug in the back and pull this whole airbox out. Right, so now that we can see in there a little better, we'll note that the fan belt tensioner is that little 14mm down there in the center of the screen. Just there. Best way to get into that is probably going to be a large or a long 14mm spanner, and obviously rotate it one way or the other, and it will loosen that fan belt. We'll get into that. So the most common way to get into a tight area like this with just tools you have at home, like regular tools, is to use two spanners. Basically, spanner number one, get right down in there. So once you manage to slip the 14mm down onto the tensioner, you can use the big lever there and then come down here onto the power steering pump and just slip it gently off the power steering pump. Once you have it slipped off, you can let that tension off like that, and then you'll notice that it's come off the air conditioning compressor pulley on the bottom. Can then start to remove our main mounting bolts, which are just 12mm bolts. That's two. Now the Barina has the same two bolts, but on the bottom end of the car. So I'm going to set up the camera best I can to see underneath, and we'll start doing those two bolts on the bottom. Right, so in order to get the compressor out the bottom, we have to remove this plastic trim, and to do that, two 10mm bolts, one and a nut here. Now I'm going to see if I can get away with it without removing it entirely. Let's see if we can just reach this around like that. Right, so we've removed the plastic trim out of the way, and I've just jammed it into that tyre there. The next step is to undo the electrical connection. So now that we're mucking with electricals, I'm going to disconnect the negative terminal on the battery. Now I'm not sure if you can see that, but this is the plug that we're disconnecting. You can kind of do it with your finger. You'll be able to do it a lot easier. But basically, 1, 2, and pop that out of the way. Those last two 12mm nuts or bolts, using a standard wrench. Once you've loosened both the bolts, you can actually see the air conditioning compressor start to move around. Alrighty guys, all done. Only took roughly 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. Hardest part was getting the car up the right height, just to get in under there to pull that plastic trim off, and yeah, to obviously get access to the bottom of the pump. Yeah, compared to most of the aircon pumps I've ever done, this was definitely one of the easiest. What do you got? 4 14mm or 4 12mm, fan belt, and you're the main line. So yeah, the fact that it comes out of the bottom without any obstruction is a blessing. You wouldn't even know it until you've done another one. So yeah, yeah, definitely something you can tackle at home, not a problem. Now, if you're on the market for one of these pumps, we've got them on our website. They're $350, free delivery Australia-wide. We are now doing international posts, so if that is something that you're in the market for, make sure you check it out on our website. Oh, and if you are doing this job yourself, be sure to have someone take a photo of you in action, send it over onto our Instagram channel, and or Instagram page rather, and yeah, send it through to our DMs. What we're doing is we're actually posting photos of people doing their own DIY repairs on their cars, giving you a free feature on our page. start small, we'll see how it goes. We might grow into something bigger, and yeah, you'll have a little spot there in one of our squares on that Instagram page. So yeah, check it out. Alrighty guys, let's get back into it. We'll throw this new one on, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. Right, so first things first, we're going to get the aircon pump back up into that hole, up in there, and you want to have one of the large or long 12mm nuts ready to go, or bolts ready to go. Now our pumps come full of refrigerant oil ready to go. Usually they don't require any topping up, so don't worry too much about that. So I'm going to head back in under here. We'll do it exactly the same way as it came out. Squeezing it up into there like that. And all you got to do is get one of those bolts back in. Once you've got one started, grab your other one. Now before we continue, I'm going to quickly chuck the top bolts in. It's a good habit to get in. Always put all the bolts in before tightening anything up. That way they line up properly. You don't thread them or nothing. Should be able to do them up by hand as well. So now that I've got all my bolts back in, I'm going to proceed to tighten up the bottom ones. You'll feel it go tight. The aircon pump will pull up into position. This type of tightness is really just a couple of hits, like that. Same thing on this side, that's going to be tight enough. Now while we're in under here, let's get our main plug back on. That's really easy. And then we want to make sure all of our wiring's tucked back up, out of the way. Not going to cause any obstruction. Now at this point, what we want to do is we want to gently rest our fan belt back over the aircon pump and harmonic balancer. And you want to look up through past all of the pulleys, including the alternator, power steering pump, etc., etc., making sure that the belt hasn't slipped off any of those pulleys. We want a nice, easy placement of that fan belt back on top of that power steering pump on top. That way there is no having to get out diagrams of fan belts, etc., etc. So now that I've put the fan belt back on, the plug back on, I'm going to bring our plastic trim back out. I'm going to drag it back over into place. It just pops all back in like that. And I'm hoping at this point, just pull it over. Remember, you have your two nuts, hopefully somewhere close by. This one's the nut. Oops. This one's the bolt. Should be able to do up the majority of it by hand. And then we'll go and get our 10mm socket on the ratchet. Which is where? This is when we tighten these up, not too tight, but definitely firm, just like that. Same thing again over here. Just back to firm. 1, 2. Right, so now that we've got the two top bolts done up, we haven't done the high pressure hose or the low pressure hose fitting, but first things first is let's get that fan belt back onto the alternator and the aircon pump. And once you have the fan belt on, guys, the last step is to bring your high pressure lines back over You want to make sure you've got your 2 O-rings on those fittings. You place it down nice and flush using your 14mm that we removed at the beginning. And we obviously tighten that down, making sure it goes nice and flush. You don't want to use power tools to finish off the tightening. You want to use a hand tool. Once again, this doesn't require any particular torque. However, it definitely requires hand tight. About there. And that's it, guys. The air conditioning compressor's back on the car. Don't forget to put your air intake box back in. Remembering to do the exact same thing, but in the other order. Remember this pipe here? Place it back on here. Your 2 10mm. Tighten up these 2 and place your air intake temperature sensor back in, etc, etc. Alrighty, all done. Took us 45 minutes to do this swap, but I reckon you can do it even quicker. Pretty much the hardest bit about it was obviously getting the car up in the air, getting those 12mm, but to be honest, overall very, very easy to do for an air conditioning compressor. This product is available on our website at www.partsfactoryoz.com.au. Free delivery Aussie-wide, and yeah, look, we do put out a lot of this type of content all the time, so if you are interested in this type of thing, or would just like to have our YouTube channel there in your little toolkit ready to go, if you ever require any help doing this type of install video, we'll always be there. You know, we've done over, I think, 300 videos now, so you never know, that next job that you need to do down the track, you might actually end up using our YouTube channel to get the job done. So yeah. Now, I'm Lucas Strabs, and thanks for watching, and I guess I'll see you next time.